On this episode, enjoy a sit-down with Jared Burkholder and our global partners, Stephen and Janelle. Hear about how they met, how God called them, and continues to use their whole family for the sake of the gospel. I'm your host, Aaron Miller, pastor of equipping at Grace Baptist Church in Santa Clarita, California. Welcome to Magnify.
If I play with this, is it going to be problematic?
No, but it is funny because Aaron, who normally hosts this, has big gorilla arms, and so they've given him foam to put here that he can.
That's funny.
Slam down,
is
but
too
not,
good.
They're not really that big of gorilla arms, Aaron. I was kidding.
Okay.
It's been funny. I wonderfully inherited all the partners that God's given us, and
True.
have tried to have background conversations. But I know sometimes you're we already talked about that with Mike. We don't talk about that with
Yeah.
you. So there are things I just don't know about you.
Sure.
That's probably
Actually,
true. I'm sure we'll share a few things today
Curious.
you haven't heard.
I think we thought of a few stories that you probably don't know.
I don't know your favorite colors, so that's huge.
Blue.
Orange.
Orange.
There's a
Blue,
rare
I think I
few
can
of
figure
us.
out. Yeah.
Is this a swallow the mic situation or?
Just talk as abnormally as possible. That's what we're going for.
mhm.
Grace, I'm here with Stephen and Janelle, and their baby, their new baby is here with us. So if you hear cooing, it's not Stephen, it's not me, it's not Janelle, it's the baby. Guys, thanks for being with us. I know, Stephen, you grew up here. Lots of people know you, but there's also people who've come to Grace since you guys have been out. It's actually, I've mentioned this before, it's an amazing phenomenon that the longer you're faithful in an international context, the less connections you have to a home church. And so that's probably been true for you guys. You guys have been out for a decade or so. Just kind of remind us about who you are. Tell us how you came to faith in Christ. Tell us how you met. I was joking with Stephen. Give us the origin story.
Here we go.
Yeah, well, who are we? That's a great question. So I grew up here at Grace my entire life, pastor's kid here, until one day we were sent out as global partners. And we've now been doing vocational ministry for 14 years. Not all of that together because we haven't been married 14 years. So yeah, we work and our focus is working with university students around the world. We have a vision of we want to see every student on every campus in every nation have the opportunity to know who Jesus is. We spend a lot of our time focused on three different facets of we want to do evangelism. We want to have the opportunity to see students engage directly with who Jesus is. And we do that by meeting them, getting to know them, building relationship with them, and sharing directly who Jesus is with them. But then we don't want to just go, oh, yay, great, this guy now knows Jesus, let's just move on. No. We want to take the time and we want to disciple that student and pour into them and take the time to watch that student go from new, young, immature believer to grow in fruitfulness, in ministry, and who they are, and even what would it look like to become a healthy church member at a church one day. Because what we'd love to see then is these students one day graduating and being sent out. We like to call that person a lifetime laborer. And they then are the ones to take the gospel to all the corners of the earth, quite frankly. I mean, they go places that we don't get to go. They can go back into their hometowns. They can go into an office building where they're going to work that we would never be able to send a worker to. They take the gospel to those places when they go. And so we want to equip them and prepare them to do that and to know how, when they are in those places, how can they now share the gospel faithfully with those who are around them and disciple those people?
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm thankful for the opportunities God has given you guys to do that and the heart that you have to still do that. Back up, talk us through little Stephen here at Grace, what it was like to grow up at Grace, what it was like to grow up as a pastor's kid. Remind us when God saved you, and then at what point did you begin to discern a call to not necessarily go in the family business, but to go into international context and ministry?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think most of my life growing up, I thought for sure one day I would be a pastor. Well, actually, at one point, I thought I would play professional baseball for the Dodgers, but that really
There's
wasn't...
still time, to be fair.
Maybe, but
There's
it really
still time.
wasn't working out well for me. So we abandoned that, and I thought, I'll be a pastor. But then that didn't really work out for me well either. I thought I would do construction management, but the Lord had other ideas. So,
Which is what you studied in college, right?
I studied construction management in college, yes.
At Cal Poly?
Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. not Pomona.
Oh, geez. Just throwing shade.
Nothing personal, Pomona. Yeah, I mean, for me, growing up here at Grace, I was immediately thrown into life in the church. It was just normal to be here. It was normal to be around every Sunday. At the time, it was every Saturday night as well, all through the week. It was here for Sunday school, for Saturday night school, vacation Bible school, so on and so forth. And so sometime around 5 or 6 years old is when I prayed to receive Christ. And that was at vacation Bible school with my table leader at the time. And, it was this idea of hell sounds like a scary place. I don't want to go there. So I think a better option is to follow Christ. And, I think moving on from there, I lived a pretty good life. There's kind of a unique life that you get to live as a pastor's kid on a campus where everybody knows you. There are certain expectations on you, I think, in certain ways, and everybody's kind of always watching you, but I enjoyed that. And it just kind of became pretty normal for me. And everything a little bit changed for me when I got to college. So like we already talked about, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And when I was there, again, that was my first real extended time away by myself, away from family, away from Santa Clarita, Grace Baptist Church, all these things that had become so normal to me. And when I was there, at one point, I was challenged to go on a summer missions trip to Israel. And so I thought, yeah, that sounds great. Give it a shot. Go see what this is like. And pretty quickly into that time, that's when I kind of learned and realized the trip that we were going on, we weren't doing a lot of the ministry things that I had been a part of in the past. Ministry for me in the past was a lot more of, let me go change some diapers in the 2-year-olds class. Let me go down to Mississippi to build a house. That was ministry for me. Ministry in this context became, we're going to meet people, we're going to get to know them, and we're going to tell them who Jesus is. And so week 1, we go out on campus, on the university there, to start to tell people about who Jesus is. And I fessed up pretty quickly of, really, I've never done this before. I've never gone to tell somebody about what I believe. And so I went with the leader of the team at that point, and he said, well, this week, you can come with me and I'll show you what this looks like. And so I went along with him and listened to him as he talked about who Jesus is. Week 2 came around and he said, okay, hey, this week, as we meet students, I want you to be the one to share the gospel with them. And so finally the time came for me. I came up to whomever we were talking to, and I was sitting there with this student, sitting there with my leader, and I just had this moment of, I have no clue what to say right now. I have absolutely no idea what to tell this person about who Jesus is. So that night, got back to our dorm, and this started for me just this crisis of faith of, I don't really know what I believe. And here, my entire life, I've grown up doing this certain thing, claiming to believe this certain thing, but I actually couldn't articulate what I believed in that moment. And for me, this ultimately caused me to realize that my salvation does not come from my status at church, but it comes from a personal relationship with Christ. Because the reality is that whether you are a pastor's kid, whether you've grown up in a church or not, all of us are separated from God because of our sinfulness. And all of us are in need of a Savior. And coming to realize that was me as well. I needed to repent of my sins and to trust Jesus. And I needed to accept God's forgiveness to me in order to restore my rightful relationship with the Father. And so that just completely transformed my life. Over time, I've actually really, in a strange way, I've come to really resonate with the Israelites, especially kind of the Jewish elite, if you will, of the time. There was this mindset back then of, and honestly, I think it continues to this day, of, well, we are part of God's promised family. And that's enough. But what the Israelites, what the Jewish people of the time needed to realize, still need to realize to this day, and what I really needed to know for myself was just being a part of this kind of natural family of, whether for them it's God's chosen race, or for me it's a pastor's kid here at Grace Baptist Church. So yeah, I've come to really resonate over time with the Israelites and kind of the Jewish elite, this sense of they've been born into the family of God. And in some sort of weird way, I feel like I resonate with that because I feel like I felt I've got this status as this pastor's kid growing up in this church, and maybe that's enough. Yes, I've prayed a prayer and I've received Christ in that way, but really it was my status that I was leaning heavily on. But ultimately to come to realize the same thing that the Jewish elites needed to understand, and the same thing that I needed to understand was, I'm a sinner that is saved by grace alone. And that was really ultimately what changed my life.
That's powerful. Janelle, let's go to you. Tell us about how your background, where you're from, how you came to faith in Christ, and then kind of describe your sense of calling into ministry.
Yeah. So I grew up in Virginia, and I had a pretty normal childhood. Honestly, we went to church.
Same place in Virginia for most of the time?
Yeah, same
Okay.
place. Yep, same place. Pretty normal childhood until it wasn't. And I'm actually not sure if you know this part of my story, Jared, but my mom passed away when I was 6 of ovarian cancer. And so as a 6-year-old, I had to grapple with, hey, bad things really do happen that are outside of your control. Just imagine kind of what that does to your worldview as a little 6-year-old. I have a son right now who just recently turned 7. So it's been interesting to kind of watch his childhood and realize so much of that was maybe how I was too. But anyways, I think it started me on this trajectory with the Lord of, I kind of call them these 2 arcs in my life, fear and control. Fear that no one I love is safe, and that bad things really do happen. And then the knee-jerk reaction of control. Well, I don't want that to be true. And so I'm going to do everything in my power to order and organize my life so that that doesn't happen. All the while, still trusting that there is a God, that he is sovereign, but struggling to figure out what that looks like in your life. And there were a few other things throughout middle school and high school that kind of added to this big question of my life of, how do I trust a God who still allows bad things to happen? How do I trust him with my life? And I think that really came to a head. I went to Virginia Tech, and my second summer there, I had a chance to go on a summer mission trip. And while we were there, we were thinking about Mark 8:34 through 36. And I won't read it right now, but the paraphrase is, if you want to save your life, you need to lose it. And it was this idea of surrender. And I think for the first time, I remember going outside after we had a time of worship and we were talking about this passage, just falling to my knees in the courtyard of the church that we were at and saying, all right, Lord, I don't understand. I'm still afraid, but I can't try to control my life anymore. And I'm going to surrender to follow you, come what may. And that was a really painful prayer to pray, living through some of the things I've lived through, just death of really close family members or friends, just pretty traumatic stuff. So I think the Lord just brought me to a point of saying, I surrender, and I'm going to open my hands before you and trust you with whatever comes.
People who know you know the last 4 years of your life story has been a lot of loss and transition from one home kind of very abruptly during COVID, not the ability to go back, not the ability to say goodbye, not the ability to pack up, to now another home. Just looking back, now knowing that about your mom, about some other stuff that happened at Virginia Tech, if you had a friend who was killed in the shooting that was there, to the loss of home, just how have you processed all of those losses? There's times when there's so much acute suffering in a particular area that you don't know what God's doing with it, and there's not a bow put on it, but it's obvious he's doing something. So just as you look back kind of across ways across your life, how have you processed some of that, recognizing then the natural reaction is fear and control?
Yeah, I think I'll share the context of my freshman year. I was at Virginia Tech, and there was a school shooting. And one of my best friends was killed, and it was in my dorm on my floor. And so yet again, wrestling with this mega question of, Lord, how do I trust you in the midst of really hard, traumatic things? And my friend Lauren, we were the same major, actually, international studies. And I had this 10-year plan. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to move overseas and be a foreign correspondent or a diplomat or something like this. Not bad plans, but just more secular and more kind of with my own ambitions in mind. But Lauren, my friend, was the same major, and she wanted to go overseas and work with international students. And she already knew that as a freshman in college. And so I remember the week before she was killed, we were having breakfast together in our cafeteria and just teasing her a little bit, good-naturedly as friends. I said, Lauren, you can't do that. You can't move overseas and tell people about Jesus. That's not a real job. Like you have to actually have a job and do something.
Right.
And so then imagine finding out she was one of the ones who had been killed and just trying to wrestle with, Lord, why her? Why not me? Why not someone else who doesn't have the heart already for the nations, who wants to use their career to glorify you. I think, and so what that did for me is it just gave me such an eternal perspective. I realized we're really not promised tomorrow. And so this illusion of control that I've been struggling with my entire life, we don't have it. And that's a good thing, actually, because God is sovereign and he is a good God. And so it's okay that we're not in control, but it's painful to work that out. And I remember meeting Lauren's mom actually at her funeral, and we're crying, we're upset, we're thinking about our friend that we had just lost. And I meet her mom, and she's full of joy and she's full of faith. And she just looks at me and says, "Don't cry. Like, it's okay. I wouldn't even wish Lauren back if I could. She's with Christ." And I just, as a freshman in college, I remember looking at her mom and going, what kind of faith is that someone can say that at their daughter's funeral? And I just really felt like that's the kind of believer I want to be. And up until that point, I wasn't sure if I really was. But I think that just gave me such a heart to continue the work that Lauren, this side of heaven, really didn't get a chance to do. I think that's honestly what the Lord used to propel me away from that 10-year plan, which again, wasn't a bad plan, but propelled me into a plan that is of his timing, his glory, his way, and just brought me into being a part of kingdom building in a way that I never would have expected.
Thanks for sharing all that. So tell us how you guys met. You both had to call to ministry, had a sense of what God was doing in your life. Fast forward to the point where God brought your stories together.
Honestly, we shouldn't have met. Stephen's obviously from California. I'm from Virginia. I had been serving in a Muslim country in North Africa. He had been in East Asia. And we ended up at this conference for people who were transitioning from short-term overseas work to long-term overseas work. And we always say it's funny because there were so many single women, very few single guys. But I noticed throughout the conference, Stephen kept finding ways to walk next to me or talk to me, just always ending up by my side. And at the time, I just thought, this is kind of interesting. This guy is always around. Come to find out later, he totally had a plan.
Yeah.
Was doing that on purpose and was trying to get time with me. And he ended up asking me one of the very last nights a question of this sort of, are you following the Lord and moving overseas because you want to be in North Africa and that's it? Or are you willing to follow the Lord anywhere? And I really had to wrestle with it because, again, control, my plans. I had to think about, am I willing to follow him no matter what? And in faith, the Lord helped me say, yeah, I'm willing to go anywhere. And Stephen always says that's the night that he decided, I'm going to go after that girl.
It's such a more pregnant question than like quote unquote normal life, right? Because it's not like, would you move to Rhode Island with me? It is like, God might take us anywhere. Are you willing to go anywhere?
Yeah. And he did. 10 months later, we were married. And then a year later, we moved to East Asia to start as a married couple. Stephen had already been there for 2 years before. But yeah, that was the start of our married life there. And my heart was really for the Muslim world. But yeah, the Lord did incredible things while we were there. And I never would have seen that it was coming in my plans.
Are you interested in becoming a member of Grace Baptist Church? Our next membership class will be on Saturday, September 21st at 8 a.m. This morning class is a great opportunity to hear more about who we are, the commitment of membership, and to meet some of our pastors. To sign up or to get more information, visit gracebaptist.org/membership. We hope to see you there. Grace, Stephen's rocking the baby to sleep. He's not dead or anything. So we'll go back to you, Janelle. Just tell us, what do you guys like to do for fun? So I think, obviously, the Lord has given you a very intense calling. I mean, your background, can I just be honest, your background's intense. Oftentimes, our global partners have a level of intensity to them that belies kind of the American apathy and cynicism because you live in places that require a lot of you and you have a calling that requires a lot of you. But I know that you still like to have fun. So what do you guys like to do to relax?
So is this pre-kids or now with 2 kids and a baby?
I think both, because also we know, I'm hoping, please, Lord, that pre-kids means also that there's a post-kid re-entry into the thing that I used to enjoy doing that I no longer can do. So both. What did you enjoy doing? And now, what do you also enjoy doing because of the gifts that God's given you? Right. The children.
So I think pre-kids, we love hiking. We love working out together. We love exploring new places. Stephen especially loves road cycling. That's been a big one for him. Unfortunately, that one's really hard overseas, so that's been a bit of a death.
A little dangerous, a little more dangerous overseas too.
Well, especially when you live in cities of 30 million plus. Yeah, right. Not a very convenient place to road cycle. So we've had to put that one on hold. He's taken up reading, which is really fun because I'm a super avid reader and I have for years been trying to get him to read.
Yeah.
And this new baby, actually, Eleanor, is the first one that has kind of given him the time and space to pick
You guys
up
just
books.
cranking Pride and Prejudice together right now? That's great.
Not so much, not your genre, right? But so other things we like to do, we really love to explore new places and new cities. That's a big deal for us. And we do that as a family. So that's with kids right now. We have this thing that we call family adventure. It often happens on Saturdays, but we'll just pick a new place and go to it. It might be, let's take the bus to a new park. Let's go to this bakery down the street that we've never gone to. Let's meet up with a neighbor friend and go play at a playground in a different part of the city. And our kids really look forward to it. It's become part of our rhythm, part of our routine, and it gives our whole family a sense of adventuring together. And that's been really, really fun. And we try to do that no matter where we live. If it's East Asia, if it's the bridge, if it's while we're back in America, that one's been really, really fun. The other thing we love to do is to have people over. We're in a season where our kids go to bed by 7:30 or 8, and then we're pretty stuck in the house. And we love to have people over after our kids go to sleep.
Yes.
And just get to play games, get to order our favorite dessert and eat it, or cook together, or watch a movie. That's been really a great way for us to continue to pursue deep friendships within the limits of our current life stage.
Yeah.
And I think the Lord has really used that in our time overseas because, you know, you're away from your family. You're not home for regular holidays and traditions. And so your team especially becomes your family. And so a big burden that we have is to help care for the young interns on our team. And so we want to invite them to do family life with us. So we invite them over. They do family devotions with us. They read books with our kids. They help put our kids to bed. They come over for birthdays. We celebrate Christmas and holidays together. That is so life-giving for us. And I think it just is a beautiful way to live in community with the people that the Lord has put in our life. And to be honest, those people change year after year. That's part of our lifestyle. We don't often get longevity in relationships, but we just make the best of it. And I think the Lord has blessed both of us with an ability to go deep quickly and to celebrate the friends that we have for however long we have them.
Stephen has re-entered the chat. Anything you want to add to the meeting story or things you guys like to do as a family?
I mean, she said it mostly accurately there.
You stalked her essentially for this conference and then got allowed you to...
It was more of one of those, you enter a room and there are several single women there and you look and you go, yeah, that one. Let's see how this works. And now I just need to get to know her a little bit. So I don't feel like it was stalking.
It's Christian stalking. It's fine.
I mean, maybe a little bit, but the good news is she had already secretly liked me before this, and I just didn't actually know that because a few years prior to this, we were at an event where she had seen me from afar leading a session on something, and she goes, oh, yeah, I like that guy. But I didn't really know who she was.
Yeah.
So who's stalking who? I'm not really sure.
That's true.
That is
That's
true.
true.
Who is stalking who? I think my exact words were, that's the type of guy I could see myself marrying someday. And then the Lord brought about the someday. Pretty amazing.
I'm trying to not replicate things we've talked about in other spaces. So I would love to hear, you guys lived in Asia and the Middle East. For people who've never gotten to visit those, just talk about what daily life is like there. So obviously there are some unique and wonderful blessings. There's some unique challenges. People are people. But yeah, what was it like to live in those places?
Yeah. So both times we lived in really large mega cities. Our first one was over 30 million, and our second city in the bridge was about 15 million. And we really have come to love urban life. You walk everywhere. You don't own a car. You get to know your neighbors. You typically are in apartments. There's just a lot about it that we've really come to like as we've lived there over the years. So yeah, both of these places we lived in cities. And while that's great and we did come to like it, there really were some unique hardships as well. Our first location, we had to deal with really heavy, unhealthy pollution. And there would be many a day when we had our oldest son, and I would think, I can't take him outside. He's a tiny baby, and I would need to stay in the apartment for 3 days.
Was he asthmatic as a baby?
Yeah. Well, we think that's part of where this came from. Yeah, there were just ways that we really felt the cost of serving the Lord in these urban settings. Our second location, as you mentioned, our son ended up his asthma flared up. It was just so hard. Everyone in that country smokes. So there's so much secondhand smoke everywhere we went, really dusty, really a hard place for a kid who has asthma. So yeah, while we love city living, we recognize over the years there's been really heavy, hard things, and especially ways that our kids have really borne the brunt of that. I also think about daily life in the Bridge, the most recent Muslim country that we were in. The call to prayer goes off 5 times a day. That can be really eerie and upsetting, especially for a kid. So we moved there when our daughter was about 2, and she would hear it go off at night, and she would have nightmares. And she would wake up crying, and it would really startle her. So we had to watch our daughter struggle with this part of the culture that was unknown to her. It's not an easy sound to listen to, and we had to help her through that. And yeah, actually, out of these nightmares developed this thing that we call the daddy shirt. So our daughter really wanted Stephen to stay in the room with her for comfort, but obviously he wants sleep. And so he ended up leaving an old pajama shirt of his in the room with her. And so she ended up sleeping with that, and still to this day, she sleeps to it.
It's funny. I do that when I travel.
Yeah.
Because my dad did that with me when he would travel.
Yeah.
He would just give me like a piece of his clothing. So I do that with my kids. They probably think it's disgusting because it smells like me. But
Right. And I'm like, Stephen's never getting that pajama shirt back. It's gone forever.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, when we think about like similarities and differences of whether it's life in East Asia or in the Bridge and then to America, the picture I want to paint for you again, we're living in mega cities in these places. And so if you're visualizing we are living in some hut way out in the middle of nowhere and we have no food or whatever, and we're having to hunt our things and gather berries, that's not our lives. We go to the grocery store and we buy groceries. We take our kids to school. We go to church. We do a lot of just normal things that normal American people do on a consistent basis. That said, when I go to the grocery store, I go basically every day. I just get the things that I pretty much need for the next 24 hours. And so we go day after day. Then on Saturday, the farmers all come from around the surrounding area outside of the city, and they bring in all the fresh produce, all the fresh vegetables and fruits and whatever you can imagine. And so we go load up on a week's worth of all that stuff at the Saturday market. And then as for school, I don't throw my kids in the van and just drive them off to their school. We load them up into our double stroller, and we start them down the hill, walking down to their school. And their school's not in English. Their school's in the local language. And then, in order to get them back up the hill, because we live on this massive hill in the Bridge, I have to bribe them with Cheetos just to get them to be distracted from the fact that they're so hungry and so tired, so they will actually walk up the hill back home. And if we're going to go to church, again, we don't get in our car to go to church. We walk down a hill, and we actually get on a boat. And we take the boat over to a different area, and we go to church over there. Yeah, we don't do a car. We're not doing these things. And so it's, again, our life in some ways, it's so similar. It's a big city. We have all the things that we have here to us in America. We just do them differently. And that's kind of the big, I think, difference and similarities in some ways.
It's interesting. I had a conversation with one of our partners, Joshua Smith, who you guys met a couple years ago, and he was saying he thinks one of the things that's hardest for most American international workers is not going internationally. It's the fact that they all come from suburban environments and go to urban environments, and they've never done city living, which makes it really, I thought that was a really interesting point, because that's true. I mean, most gospel workers that I know have come from suburban environments. And like the thought of living in New York City just blows their mind, right? And so you add to that, you're living in New York City in a country that then is very different. I just think that's interesting. I know that for international workers, the thought of home is really complicated. So just talk about how you guys process that. Now, having had 2 homes removed from you, being back in the States, not necessarily having a home. You guys have said that you've only really lived in the East Coast as a family in the States. How have you guys thought through that? And then you guys have been really intentional to provide a home for your kids, even on the road. So just kind of talk through that a little bit.
Thanks for recognizing that home is a really complicated word for us. We feel very caught between both worlds. So there's this illustration we like to share sometimes to help people understand this concept. So if we're Americans, imagine little stick figures and we have like a square head. And then we move over to East Asia, or we move to the Bridge, and the people there are stick figures, but they have a circle head. Well, then here we are, and we're living there, we're working, we're trying to serve the Lord, but we're never fully going to be circle heads. And yet, we're never fully going to fit back in with the square heads. And so we become what we call stop sign heads. Mm-hmm. And it's this idea that you become a new identity, a new person, but you're caught between both worlds. And we feel that so deeply. We're never fully American, but we're never fully East Asian, or we're never fully from the bridge. And so it can be really lonely. It can be really hard to just feel like you consistently don't belong fully in any place that you go. So you think about the concept of home. Home is where you relax. Home is where you can settle and like put your roots down. Well, what does that look like when you don't fully belong in any one place? So as a family, what we've landed on, this is, I think, the Lord's grace to us, is we've really just tried to teach our kids home is wherever we are as a family right now. And that might be totally different in a year. But as long as we're together as a family, that's home. And we were even telling our son the other day in the car, he was asking about, Stephen growing up here in Santa Clarita, and he was thinking it's so cool that Daddy went to the same elementary school, the same middle school, the same high school. He has all these memories of a childhood in one place. And you could see our son kind of trying to process that information of, wow, that's like different than my childhood. So we were trying to help him understand what's so cool about the story that the Lord has given to our unique family is we get to have home in a lot of different places. So we have home in East Asia. We have home in the Bridge. We have home in California when we come back and visit Grace Baptist. We have home in Virginia when we go see my family. We have home in just wherever we're at. And I think to frame it in that sense as like, this is an adventure that the Lord has called us to as a family. And yeah, it's different from a family who gets to live in their forever home and never have to transition and say goodbye. It's a different story, but it doesn't have to be a bad story. It doesn't have to be a hard story. There are hard parts, but in fact, I think the Lord has given us eyes to see the beauty and the blessing in it.
I think too with that, we've found as we're moving around so much, because the reality in the past 4 years for us is we've spent significant time living in 3 countries. How do you help your kids to feel like they can transition well in these different places and to feel like they can be home? One of the things that we've just kind of decided as a family is we need to bring some of their stuff with us to make that happen. And so some people might just choose to kind of, we just pack up our clothes and we go. We've said, well, we're going to bring some of the other stuff. We're going to make sure that when we unpack some of their toys that they've been playing with kind of forever, that they still unpack, and we lay out that same bedspread and the same pillowcase that they're always used to having. Or Isaiah has this car rug that we got in East Asia that's none of it's in English at all. Like the same car rug that I played with as a kid, but it's not in English this time. It's all in the local language. And so he still plays with that car rug because we bring it with us. And it's a lot more work for us, and it's a burden that we as the parents kind of have to bear for our kids. But when we get to a new place and we open up a box or a suitcase and we pull out these things, here within a day or so, all of a sudden our kids are home, because this room feels like it was supposed to feel, even though the flooring is different and the windows are different and the country is different, but the room is still the same. It's their room, it's their stuff. And I think that's really been something that's helped our kids do well in such a transient season of life.
The other thing I was thinking of too, kind of what you're sharing, is we tend to try to live seasonally. So we pay attention to the seasons. So we do the same thing for Christmas every year. We do the same candy trick-or-treat trail for Halloween. We do the same thing for birthdays. But the people change and the location changes. But I think the fact that we try to do the same traditions, no matter where we go, helps our kids because they know what to expect. And I think there's a beauty in that too, because I always look back on their birthday pictures and I can just see who were we living life with that year. And yeah, there's pain. I think, of course, with this lifestyle, this type of calling, there's so many goodbyes, and that grief gets stacked upon each other. But there's also really a lot of fond memories. We look back at those photos and I remember, oh yeah, that's the year that we lived next to that family and we would play with them every day in the park, and our kids got to know their kids. And so I just think it becomes just quite a story to tell. And we have a lot of stories to be able to look back with our kids.
That's interesting. I find I care a lot about traditions. In fact, it's getting to the point where like we almost can't navigate Christmas because I've instituted so many traditions around the holidays that we can't fit them all in. I remember my parents dropped me off at college and then went back to Mexico. And that was a hard year trying to figure out, who am I? Like, I got no family anywhere. I'm in the Poconos of Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And I can't remember the reference, but I remember reading a passage that talks about how God is himself our home, and just like things clicking in of like, I can't take my kids back to most of the homes I grew up in because somebody else lives there and they're in places that aren't accessible to me anymore. But just to know that like the Father's my home, and wherever I am with the Father's home, and then to compound that with I have a great family, so where my family is his home. There's something wonderfully hard for international workers and then for TCKs to have to grapple with. Everybody has to grapple with that on some level. Certainly, we sit at funerals, we think about that. But I think that's one of the weird, painful blessings of living internationally, especially as a gospel worker, of having to wrestle with what is home? Where do I derive that sense of control and comfort from? How do I overcome fear?
I think it's helped us really look towards heaven.
Yeah.
And we talk about that with our kids a lot.
Yep.
Like, there is a day coming where we don't have to say goodbye anymore. And we don't have to wipe away any more tears. And we don't have to fear what the future may bring. We don't have to live in pain. So I think in just a unique, like you said, beautifully, wonderfully hard way, our kids are living with that reality. And our son actually loves the song Almost Home, which, we sing that here at Grace Baptist. And I feel weepy when we sing that song because it is hard to sing that. And it's so true, but
I'm an ugly worship crier, so just join me down front.
Right. Oh, yeah. I'll be there with you.
Just love to cry in worship.
Yeah, I think, but I tear up, of course, for myself, but I also tear up on behalf of my kids, of the cost that they have had to bear too. We love them. They're doing well overall. And yet there are things that have been really, really hard for them. So I also look forward to the day where we aren't going to have to say goodbye and we're not going to have to move every year and we're just going to get to be with the Lord and just be in his presence with all of our believers and hopefully people from many, many nations going to be there with us too. So I think it's, just given us an eternal perspective, a longing for heaven that, it might have been hard to have that in a life that was more stable, perhaps.
Yeah. There's so many people that love you. You guys have been really generous with your time during this season back in Santa Clarita. I've really enjoyed connecting with you. Grace, because of the security sensitivity nature of their ministry, if you want to get connected updates, you can just talk to me or someone in my office. We'll help you connect that. We don't put that kind of stuff online. We're careful about that. But Stephen and Janelle are really faithful to give updates. Because there's so many people that love you, in addition to praying, what's one way that people can care from you, both your time here and then even from afar?
One big way is while we're in these seasons of transition that happen outside of our control, stay with us.
Yeah.
Continue to pray for us, continue to love us, continue to support us, continue to check in and see how we're doing, continue to love our kids and mail them packages and be excited about the things that they're excited about. This was not our plan. Like we've talked about this before. We wanted to have longevity. And we've wanted so badly to be the people, the workers who can be in these countries and be there a long time and faithfully get to know our neighbors, faithfully get to know students and help them come to know Christ. And for whatever reason, we don't know quite what the Lord's doing. That isn't the story that he's been giving us. And instead, we keep getting rerouted. We keep having these seasons of waiting and transition. And so I think the biggest thing Grace can do for us, and it's what you're already doing, but is to stay with us and to transition with us through these seasons of uncertainty. We don't know really what's next, but let's figure it out together and let's see what the Lord is going to do after whatever he's doing right now, right? Like, so believe in us, trust the Lord. Let's do it together, and we'll see what God does.
That's beautiful. Thank you guys so much for being with us. Thanks for the generosity of your time and just the transparency and vulnerability you've shared throughout your time here. It means a lot, I think, for people to get a greater glimpse into the beauty and also the cost of sharing the gospel. And what I love about you guys is you're very honest about the cost, but the cost doesn't drive you away from doing it. In fact, it kind of drives you back to it because it's worth doing. So thank you guys for being here. Thanks, baby, for hanging out with us.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Make sure to subscribe to Magnify Podcast so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. We would love to hear from you, so if you have any questions you'd like to ask in our mailbag, you can email them to magnify@gracebaptist.org, and we will answer them on the show. Thank you so much for streaming.